Welcome to A State of Mind, a podcast series all about motivating, inspiring, and educating you in the art of selling luxury real estate. The podcast is brought to you by the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. I'm Tami Sims, lead trainer for the Institute and a full time real estate professional in St. Petersburg, Florida, for more than 2 decades. In this episode, we're going to explore digital marketing strategies. First, today's podcast is brought to you in part by Real Marketing, the only marketing firm recommended exclusively by the Institute. Real Marketing utilizes over 25 years of expertise, and their products are built and customized for you to dominate any neighborhood, anywhere. Go to realmarketing4u.com. That's real marketing, the number 4, u.com. Also, look for past A State of Mind episodes with CEO David Collins as our guest. I'm here today again with my co host, Jack Miller, a 25 plus year veteran luxury agent with Onward Real Estate in the greater Nashville, Tennessee market. And today we have a special guest joining us, Will Hayes, who's the senior growth strategist and head of paid media with Toby Agency, the Institute's go to for all things digital marketing. So, welcome to both of you. We're glad to be here with you.
Hi, Tammy. Hi, Will. How you doing?
Hi, nice to see you guys again.
Excellent, excellent. So, Jack, before we dig in, when we last spent time together, for those of our loyal audience who may remember, you were navigating into a new space with your brokerage change. And so I'm just curious how your market and your clientele are settling in with the change. I think it's kind of relevant to the conversation that we're having today.
Yeah, actually, I think they're all settling in much better than we are. From their standpoint, as far as other brokers in the marketplace and with our clients, it's pretty seamless. And we've tried to make it such. So one of the things that we've done, Tammy, is with our print marketing, with our social media marketing, everything we pretty much have been doing, we've kept the framework the same. So, for example, if you see an ad that we do in one of the luxury print publications, we're keeping the same basic template. And what they're seeing, even the same, headshots and everything, but what they're seeing is the branding changes only in regard to company name and logo. And we did that intentionally. We wanted to make sure it felt as comfortable and familiar to our clients and other brokers. So it seemed fairly, the focus is more on these are the same people you're accustomed to dealing with. We just have a new name. Now,
Absolutely.
behind the scenes, where I'm concerned, or my business partner Robert is concerned, it's not nearly as seamless, but we're getting there. So,
Right. It's kind of like the swan above water looks really
yes,
great and is kicking like mad underneath. And
yes,
Will, I saw you nodding your head there because I know some of those principles really apply to what you're going to talk about. And so tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in the real estate marketing realm.
Yeah, I've been a digital marketing professional for about 15 years, specializing definitely on the digital paid side, focused on search with Google, and then of course all the social media channels as they've kind of like grown and proliferated across all the media landscape. So you know definitely a lot of expertise in how to use these channels to benefit from across a number of industries, but particularly with the real estate industry, I've kind of niched down and focused over the last 4 or 5 years, working directly with besides just agents and brokerages, but also within the industry, different partnerships, and of course with ILHM as well. So a lot of knowledge and a lot of trial and error within this industry as well to see kind of what sticks, what works, and excited to be here today. And I like what you were saying, Jack, in terms of like, I love that idea of keeping the look and the feel of things very similar. And then just having just like the smallest change, because from the customer standpoint, that familiar look, like they see it and it immediately resonates. They because it feels familiar, they know it's something, and then they're willing to give it a little bit more time and kind of acknowledgement. So that's a very astute and smart move on your part.
Yeah, and
thank.
Will, I had mentioned when we talked about this last time that my mother, who has 38 years in the business, for 17 years she was in the same office with the same manager, but the brand name kept changing. And so she would just swap out the little logo at the bottom, and her branding was consistent. So I think that's something that really translates through all parts of marketing and branding. Jack, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, no, but well, I think what's interesting is, for us, and I'm sure this was the case, Tammy, for you and your mom, the company name has changed. It's a significant change that we're going through here. It's a brand new company. We've got 300 top producing agents and brokers here, so that part's wonderful. But what hasn't changed is for our personal brand, it's still about luxury. And so that hasn't changed at all. So that's why it's easy to kind of, that's the focus is on, we're here in the luxury space within a new framework, a new company. So that's where we're trying to keep the focus.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Will, our Institute members have had the opportunity to engage in a webinar series that you've been delivering that's really a drill down into the nuances and the how-tos of digital marketing. And I don't want to duplicate those, but I do want you to share some high points, if you will, especially for those in the audience that understand the basics and are interested in how to apply them. And so I want to ask you first about the way that you articulate goal setting as SMART, if you would, please.
Yeah, so just to take even a step further, I actually have a digital marketing. I was an instructor in the past, so one of the frameworks that when we would introduce this to students was always called like the objective first framework. Understand what your ultimate goal is before you start, putting pen to paper and thinking about, the tactics and strategies and, all the executions that you're going to implement. And the best way to kind of describe, how to start this was with this acronym SMART. So create a SMART goal. The SMART being specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and then the last one is timeliness, right? We always want to make sure there's a time bound, so it forces us to take action. What I really try to hone in is on the realistic side of goals, right? So when we think about, what can we actually achieve? Obviously everybody wants to be flooded with leads. We want to get, the highest number we can possibly get. But once you start to think about how much it might cost to, acquire not even a lead, but just somebody to your website, and then realize, maybe the average conversion rate is 10%. So that means, okay, I need to get 10 people to my website. You start doing simple math and you realize, oh, okay, like in order to even capture, potentially a lead, we're talking about $50, $100. Well, then that helps me set my expectations in terms of, how much am I willing to even spend, at the start to then, go forward and push and try to drive leads. So, best way always to start when we're thinking about any kind of marketing is, what's my ultimate goal? How am I going to judge my performance? And then let's put it, let's put it down on paper and let's be as specific as possible, identify our audience, figure out what's realistic, and then, try to go from there.
Yeah. Jack and I have been doing a lot of thinking about business planning. And I think this comes right into that conversation. And I know Jack's in an interesting spot because they're going to push out their business planning just a little bit because of, some of the changes going on. But when we sit down and we talk about measurability, return on investment, and I know from the print media side, ROI looks different, at least for me and probably for Jack. And it's more of that consistency
More
in the
about brand
messaging.
and generating leads. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So sometimes we measure that in a different way. And I love what you're saying, Will, about social in order to be effective, right? You've talked about the fact that you can't just like throw money at the wall and expect it to work. You have to really look at it and you have to think about what it is that you want. And something that struck me is, do you want leads? Do you want more business or do you want exposure? So talk a little bit, Will, about the difference in those things and like maybe some of the tactics that somebody might engage in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's, the way I look at it when I start is, separating the idea of business needs versus the marketing needs, right? They can be a little bit different. The business might want that brand exposure, because they're more focused on like, the long-term goal, driving awareness, getting people to understand and feel familiar with the brand so that when they are approached by, an agent, they're more receptive to that first sales meeting. And there's the marketing goals where sometimes we're measured more in a vacuum where it's a shorter term investment. We're trying to generate, something a little bit quicker. So again, coming back to objective first, like what is our ultimate goal? What are we focused on? And then, marketers, we like to overuse certain visuals. So when we're talking about kind of what you mentioned, we like to think about a funnel approach where the top of funnel would be about driving awareness, building brand, and getting people to know, to understand, and hopefully love the brand. And those tactics are generally about driving reach, getting engagement, and then just getting people to see and become familiar with who we are as a brand. So on social media, that's more focused on high engaging content, video driven content that reaches the audience, but then also tells a message or a point of view, right? What's the point of the brand? It should be very obvious from the content who is being targeted and what the ultimate objective is in terms of like the audience, and then getting them to obviously come down and work through the funnel. And then from there, then we start to work lower in the funnel, and that's when we talk about, generating leads, generating sales. Like, how can I get somebody to self-identify themselves as a potential customer, to raise the hand, and then how do I get them to exchange the information, right? A lot of times, we like to think about either, some form of like lead magnet or some offer that we can give them in exchange. And a lot of times, we can get actually pretty creative with those lead magnets where it's not just like, hey, tell me, you're ready to sell your house. So, a lot of times we can think about it in deeper. One of the most popular ones that came out over the last couple of years was like a home value calculator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that if somebody's looking for the value of their home, they're probably a little bit further in that decision-making process. But, there's other things that we can think about where, maybe we can put a list of the top ways to increase home value in the shortest period of time. Like, what's the best renovation designs, or the best way to stage a house. People who are getting closer to selling their home, this is going to resonate a little bit further with them. So they'll be more willing and more apt to engage with that content. And then by doing so, they're kind of like self-identifying themselves. And that's when we talk about, okay, that's the bottom of the funnel approach. Now we want to really engage with that customer, that potential customer, and then see if we can work them further, get them into a sales meeting, and then so on and so forth.
Will, I have a question for you. So it's interesting because you talk about things, your plan being measurable. When you're doing digital marketing, what I'm hearing you say is if you're not looking for specific numbers of leads, that's measurable, of course. But in social media or digital marketing, it may just be exposures, and you can track that. You can see how many clicks you've had, how many views you've had, whatever. Obviously, that's measurable too. That's one of the biggest challenges we've had for years, before digital marketing was available, and even still in print media. It's a very visual media or a visual industry that we're in. And so as a listing broker, our sellers, of course, want to see us in social media, for example, but they also want to see themselves, and I mean, their properties in print. And that's a very expensive form of branding, a very expensive form of advertising, yet most of us do it in the luxury space. I'm just curious, as a digital marketing specialist, what your opinion is in the print world, and do you see what you do working in tandem with, or do you just see it as antiquated and why are we still doing it?
It's
Nothing like putting you right on the spot, Will, there.
well, I love it. It's a great question. When I first started, in marketing, I definitely wasn't specialized in digital media. I mean, honestly, when I first started, digital media was just coming up. So we were honestly, at the marketing table, we were fighting for scraps. We were lucky to get 5% of a budget to even run campaigns. So, I've seen it from both sides. I did, print, television, radio, all the traditional forms, even newspapers, if you believe it or not. But I think ultimately there's a place for everything, and they work in tandem as long as they're executed and there's a strategy behind it that makes sense, right? So the same way I'd go about, creating and crafting a digital campaign about, thinking about the audience and trying to hone in on, prospective, customers, is the same way I'd go about doing with print, right? The one thing with print is we've always we've always kind of understood, and the same thing is with radio and television, that there's this concept of wasted spend. We knew that 50% of our market would get targeted, or 50% of our spend would go to our targeted customers, but we also knew that in doing that there was a little bit of a loss there, and that's always been kind of like what the digital marketers tried to like hold up as a flag, that we were better in terms of targeting. But in every kind of like research or study that I've seen, there's always a correlation between this quote unquote integrated marketing approach, where people are using multiple touch points and tactics to reach their customer, to get them exposed to the brand, so that when sales does come through, they're more willing and accepting to engage. So there's always been this theory about 7 touch points. Your marketing has to touch somebody 7 times before they're even you know it even recognize that name, that brand. And then so just because you're on social media doesn't mean you're always going to get those touch points. Sometimes having a different a different medium come directly to them, like print, like ultimately there's little we can do on the digital side to compare with somebody holding a high quality laminated postcard with your face on it, that's calling out your past sales, or that would resonate to that customer. So like there's definitely I would always say value in that. But you know going back to the way I approach it in terms of the funnel, there's definitely probably in print, it's probably more of a top of funnel type of approach, right? It's more about brand development, awareness within the market, than it is necessarily, generating leads. Obviously, we ultimately want to get there, but it is hard to ask for somebody, or really identify, as we talked about, that they're further down the funnel with just print, right? That's the benefit of digital media, is I can get somebody to engage with the piece of content, and because of that engagement, I can understand at least where they are in the funnel. And we can't really do that necessarily on print, but it doesn't mean that we can't utilize print for what it's worth, which is getting high quality exposure to potential customers and getting something in their hand.
Yeah, I
You know,
think it's safe. Oh, sorry, Tammy, go ahead.
no, no, please, please. I think both Jack and I are like our
Yeah, yeah.
brains are
Well,
spinning here. We've got great
well, it's
ideas, and we're taking
interesting.
this down directions.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've, Tammy and I both have been in this industry long enough to have seen print be at the forefront and now see digital be at the forefront. And I think it's fair to say there must, beyond being a relationship between the two and the importance of the two working together, there must be some validity to staying active in print media. Because if you look at all the major brands in the luxury space, whether it's luxury automobiles, jewelry, resorts, pick pick the product, they all have a major presence in print media. So they're spending, they have big budgets. So
Yeah.
clearly they think there's something to be said for brand awareness in print media. And it's just interesting because now our focus is very much so on social media and digital media. And Will, I'll probably calling you later on that note. But it's just always fascinating me because I know that for our clients on a one-on-one basis, they really focus on, they want to see it in print. And yet, ironically, print is the one part of our budget that's not measurable. We can measure how many households a publication goes to, but we
Yeah.
can't measure views, because just because it goes in the mailbox doesn't mean the magazine gets opened. And you're able to measure what happens in digital marketing, which I think is terrific. And demographically speaking, same thing. You know a lot more demographics of who is the one who's doing the clicking in your
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm kind of thinking that you've got print and some of those other more traditional, even some direct public facing social media and that sort of thing, that's two dimensional, right? Like I think back, my mother had her first website in 1986. You know what that looked like?
That's a
It was a
long,
static page,
yeah,
right, with dial up that took an
that's
hour to
impressive.
load, and it
That's
had
impressive.
one picture of her on her brick car phone, right? And that was the extent of web page, right? So there's two-dimensional messaging that is that kind of brand awareness, but I feel like digital marketing allows the opportunity to really show personality. Like I follow Jack on social media and he loves to share photographs of amazing homes and architectures and spaces. And that tells me who he is. I have a sense of his style and his personality. And so I know in some of your courses, Will, you talk about you've got creative, you've got targeting, right? Seeing what resonates with your audience, and I'm curious about your take on that deeper that personality potential as opposed to just a straight offer or a call to action.
Oh yeah, I love that. Love that question, especially when we're talking about, the top of funnel, brand awareness, building engagement. I mean, the first thing we say when we talk about brands is you got to have a point of view, and that point of view's got to come across. It can't just be, something bland. And really the best way to do that is through, your personality, which ultimately is why I think, the people that are consistent on social media end up being the most successful because it might take them, a couple iterations to realize how to even come across on social media, right? They might be nervous first time they turn that phone around, not thinking they know what to say, but ultimately they become more comfortable, and becoming more comfortable, the personality really starts to come through. And ultimately that personality, I mean, that's what social media is all about, right? Is being able to engage with real people. So that's what's going to resonate. That's what's going to drive the engagement and get recognition from your audience, and ultimately lead to, what our goal is, which is for them to recognize us in the market as, a luxury leader, or just as an agent that they can rely on and look to be an expert, and then ultimately hopefully help sell the home.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, One big point I think is that digital marketing is not just social media, right? You
Yeah.
spend a lot of time talking about the difference between um, um, behavior, image driven that is more social media, and then keywords that are copy driven. And um, I remember there was a time when you could organically show up first in a Google search, right? And channeling my mother again here, some time ago when a lot of this technology was new, she was named one of the top 10 female bloggers in the country.
Wow.
Wow.
And our content brought us to the top. And if people were trying to find out about what the concert was in the park, they would call us because they thought that we were the ones putting it on. And there was that time when that organic content just really ruled. And now we're that day is gone. But you
Tammy,
talk a lot.
I want to
Yeah.
tag on to that. It's very interesting too. I just had a flashback as you were describing that. I remember distinctly our first website would have been probably in '98, I believe, for me and Robert at Parks. And I remember distinctly as I looked around at what our colleagues were doing, and this trend went on for several years. Will, I'm sure you remember this. In the real estate industry, what agents were trying to do was trying to make their website the portal for all things in their community. And the community can be a neighborhood, it could be the city, it could be the state. And so, for example, in our market, we would see agents, and we did the same thing. Your website would be the Tennessee Titans, the Tennessee Predators, the Chamber of Commerce. It's like we were trying to be the portal for all things having to do with Nashville. And it's interesting because as you fast forward to today, we're the exact reverse. Now everybody has completely specialized in what it is they do, and now it's linking to other people,
Be the source of the
other
source.
other websites, and connecting resources and being a place to find resources, but not trying to be the spokesperson for all things in your marketplace, which was damn near impossible. That was a challenge. I mean, in terms of content, Tam, like your mom was doing, people were doing it for content to get up in the Google ratings or whatever in the search. But at the same time, it was nearly an impossible task to try to manage that and then actually be out there in the marketplace doing what we do. So it's been a pretty big change.
Yeah, you definitely want to be more the expert who's guiding people towards the content than the actual source of it, for sure.
Right.
It's also a very timely kind of like subject, Tammy, right now, because in across really all of, especially when you're talking about search and SEO, like this is a big kind of question right now about what is the best approach, because um with Google specifically, because they own about 85% of search, they've made a lot of variations to the way the search result page even shows nowadays. And it's changed a lot. Like, it used to just be a couple of ads and organic results, but now, especially if they're like localized searches, that means the map's going to show up first, and it's going to have content from the map that's going to be there, and that's going to push, that'll dominate 80% of the screen share, and then it'll push everything else, the organic results, down. If you ask it a question nowadays, it's going to try to answer the question directly, right? Versus, giving you pages that you can go to. It's just going to pull a blurb out and answer the question right there. And then again, that's going to push the search results, the organic search results, down. And then the last thing, obviously, is with the AI. Again, they're trying to understand what you're asking and provide the information right there. So again, 3 different things that they're doing, all of which are pushing organic results down, which is why it's making it super hard to even think about ranking for organic content and then even having that organic content drive traffic. So a lot of things that we've been doing, especially within this industry, is understanding that a lot of searches are localized based searches, which means the maps are going to dominate. So we want to show up on the maps as much as possible, and kind of like, rule that like section of Google, knowing that that's going to be one of the gateways and one of the easiest ways for potential customers to find us. The other thing is understanding that, Google does want to tailor its message towards essentially local services. And they understand that a lot of these national brands know how to do SEO and kind of dominated the landscape, and that's not exactly proliferated or turned into, I would say, like high quality results. They know that these local companies, they're the ones that engage with the customers the most, provide a higher quality experience for, Google's customers. So they're starting to allow local, based services to kind of win again in the searches. And it's not driven by content. It's actually because you're linking your Google My Business profile, you're setting it up to win. You're engaging with customers on Google with reviews, messages, and Google sees that as a clear signal that you are somebody within the community that is very engaged and authentic, and they're starting to reward that. So, it's definitely been a big shift in the industry, and it's going to continue. And it's one that we're trying to, stay ahead of. And it's a fun time, but it's also a challenging time if you come from that, like, oh, content wins, content wins,
Yeah.
content. A little bit different nowadays.
Yeah, I was pleased to hear you say that on one of the webinars, that there's some thoughtfulness behind the giant, in terms of kind of leveling that playing field, and also of their understanding that the consumer is frustrated um, if they're not seeing good content. And I will tell you that, I have figured out, for at least my own usage, that if something is sponsored, that means that they have paid money to be there, and they're going to pay more money if I click it. And so if it's a company that I like and I want them to keep their prices down and keep me as a customer, I will scroll down until I find their organic listing. But if it's a company that I don't have a high opinion of and I need to go there for whatever reason, I will click that sponsored, and I will smile knowing that they had to pay for that click, right?
Oh man,
So,
as a
The
digital marketer,
vindictive
I don't know how to
user.
take that. I don't know how to take that.
I
well,
have a
it
question.
It's
it's
true.
kind of the thing about the personality and the perception,
Yeah.
and all of that, all of that.
I have a question, Will, or in an entirely different arena here, but still digital. It's where digital meets print. So one of the interesting things that there's been a technology around for many, many years that remained largely untouched by our industry and most industries as far as retail, but became widely used during COVID, and that was the QR code.
Barcode, yeah.
And suddenly everything was about a QR code to keep people from touching menus and touching pieces of paper and whatever else. And so I remember we used QR codes, gosh, probably 20 years ago when we
Hmm.
first came out, and we would stick them in magazines and nobody knew what to do with them trying to. And so we dropped it because it was too hard to try to educate and use that technology. And we're trying to make that leap from print to digital. And the idea then, and it's still the idea today. And again, I'm going back on print. When you're doing these really, high-end luxury publications, white space is valuable. You want to see images that are luxurious, and you want to see textures and colors and things that look like you got to have it. But if you fill it up with a bunch of words, then it looks junky. It starts to look like a used car ad. Okay. So a QR code allows you to bypass all that and drop a QR code where they can look at the picture and hold their phone over the QR code and go to a website or whatever else. One of the challenges we've had is the QR code itself feels almost like you're slapping a barcode on your $7 million home. It doesn't really feel good, but it's real functional. Do you have any thoughts on the use of QR codes in the luxury space? What any feedback you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when we started talking about it a little bit earlier in terms of like the measurability of print and how we would go about doing that. And, one of the two ways and kind of, that we've always thought about it is, um, how do I measure redemption? I either get somebody to bring that, that piece of content in as the form of like a coupon or some kind of redemption offer, or, I get them to, like you said, scan a QR code and get online. And of course I can measure that, that person came from that QR code just because of, with simple tracking. But ultimately the QR code, I think people understand its usage, and I don't think it necessarily has that negative connotation, but it ultimately also comes down to how you use it. Like, what's the point of the QR code if it's just slapped there with no explanation, no like call to action? The usage of it's going to be real low. But if there's like, and I love doing this, having like a cliffhanger where it's like, here's a tease of content in print in your hand. I'm giving you like a top 5 places, but I only give you 3. You got to scan the QR code for the last 2. Well,
Ah.
that'll drive engagement, but it's also, they know they're going to get a benefit from it, right? So it's not necessarily that the user thinks it's, some kind of scheme. It's offer, it's a benefit to them by, again, getting to the website and then again continuing with the content. So, you know, you can use the QR code to your benefit if there's a strategy behind it. And more than not, it's just, what can I give to the customer that's going to make them want to use it, right? If it's just, hey, here's more photos of the same thing you're looking at, not necessarily going to do you any good. But if it's like, here I can see you're on a journey. Here's like the next step in that journey. Here's some more valuable content. Here's a value add. You might see a lot more engagement with it, and I think it'll resonate and people will appreciate that. And especially if the experience when they get to the site, has the kind of same look and feel. It feels luxurious. It feels high end. I don't think that they're going to come across as thinking it's, something cheesy or lowbrow.
That makes me think, Will, I think it's a perfect explanation, but it also reinforces a concept that you say a lot when you're instructing, and that is that if you've got a call to action, whether it's a QR code or a hot link or whatever, that you need to have very specific and appropriate landing pages for those calls to action. And so what you were just describing, if somebody wanted to find out more information about that $7 million property, right, that QR code is going to drop them in an immersive experience more than likely about the property. And ironically, as we talk about all of this brand positioning, messaging, all of that, I am in the process. I have had architect plans done to do an addition to my house and also to create an ADU.
Nice.
And I'm at the point where um, I'm getting quotes from some builders and that sort of thing. And so there is on my desk right here, there is a postcard that I saved from going in the garbage because it is a builder that has built a reputation as being the go-to for ADUs, right?
Yeah.
And so they're hitting me at the moment. They've positioned themselves as a brand. They're hitting me with a call to action at the moment when I am ready for that. And they have here, it says whether you need more space for family or friends, looking for extra rental income, an accessory dwelling unit is a great option for you. Scan this QR code to get in contact with us about starting your ADU journey. That is such a specific call to action. And I have it here on my desk, and I am prepared to scan that QR code. And I have the expectation that I am going to land on a page that is specifically designed for what I want to know after reading this, right? It's not just going to be like a sign up for more information. It's going to be a, what are you looking for? What are your motivations, right? So they've just accomplished that
Yeah.
from a broader sense, and I'm seeing them on my social feed and all of that. So it's that nice combination, as we've been talking about, print, digital, messaging, positioning, and the call to action. So I've just been chuckling inside that this whole circle has happened and it's sitting here on my desk. But we'll talk a little bit more about those specific types of landing pages, right? So you
Yeah,
can
no,
do
I
the
love it.
digital media, but you gotta send them somewhere.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, it's like digital marketing 101 with that postcard. Understand the customer's pain points, understand, what's going to resonate, and then put the proper message in front of them. And then ultimately, we've been, our, digital marketers have known for years that specific landing pages that match the message, match the offer, will always outperform any general page that you're going to send traffic to. So our recommendation when we're doing any kind of, campaign or execution, as much as we can, obviously, there is some constraints, whether if it's a single person has to run everything, it's a little bit harder to do this, multiple iterations of landing pages. But in all honesty, landing pages and a specific page based off of the campaign will always outperform a general page in every instance. And, this has been studied multiple times across different industries, different executions, and we've seen wide numbers in terms of like increases of performance in terms of like driving leads or driving cost per acquisitions down. But it's always a very big net gain when you can use a specific landing page that essentially is tailored to, the offer, and then that message matches where the audience is, right? So as much as we can, we try to get very specific with the pages. Obviously, with the landing page too, it's a little bit, it helps us design the page for conversions, right? Because if we're getting them to that page, there's a purpose that there's a purpose in that, and then we're trying to get them to, either exchange their information for content, to purchase something, to sign up for more information, whatever it may be. But like, we can build the page with that purpose versus, a home page is more like you're walking into a grocery store, or sorry, I would say even like a retail store, and it's like,
Oh,
here's
let's
every
go Whole Foods,
offer.
right? Let's go
You know,
Whole Foods, right? We'll
you
be we'll
walk
be
in the
high
store, it's
class.
like, here's everything I offer. So it's a gateway to get you in any single direction, right? Well, with landing page, generally speaking, we know why they clicked or why they got to that page, right? So we don't have to go through that whole process of like, oh, here's everything I offer, and lay it all out and get them confused and then make them not quite understand what to do next. Like, we can be very specific, tailor that message, put the offer, the content right in front of them. And that's why you're generally going to see a lot more conversions and a lot more success with, tailored landing pages.
Absolutely. Makes perfect sense to me. But you also made a point about individual real estate professionals may not be able to tackle this all themselves. So if you had to give some advice, um, as we are getting on in our conversation about how somebody could reach out, like in their own marketplace, or maybe they want to engage Toby, a larger company, what would be the first step for somebody who wanted to hire someone to assist with social media
Yeah, I
or
mean,
digital marketing?
you could always reach out to us. We can definitely take that on. But ultimately, I would say even before they do that, they would probably want to, like I mentioned before, is think about like what would be the ultimate goal. Because there are a lot of people out there that can do, social media, and you run ads for you, that, and I don't even want to say they're disingenuous, but they'll wait for you to kind of like dictate.
Mm,
Obviously, in the most instances, you're a real estate professional, you're not a digital marketer, right? So you don't necessarily know what the right execution is, and you're relying on their expertise, and they're kind of waiting for you to dictate strategy because it's kind of a safer approach, and that's not really the best way to win. So ultimately understand what it is that you want to achieve. And then, that's first step. And then, try to engage people that, just like we do when we talk about focus on, luxury real estate, luxury market, try to find people that have a focus on, real estate and focus within the industry and have expertise, or at least have, they've done it before, right? They can show you case studies, or they can at least show clients, because every industry is a little bit different. So, understanding the nuances and, how you might want to approach the potential customer, it varies, again, from every industry, and there's definitely a different way to go about it within, the real estate market.
I have a question for
wow.
you, Bill. When
Yeah.
if somebody is, whether it be you or one of your competitors, if there's an agent out there who's considering engaging someone who provides digital services like yourself, and they come to you and say, "Hey, we're very interested in, could you provide references?" Is it appropriate to ask for references of other agents, perhaps in other markets or whatever that this particular company has done work for?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I mean, it never hurts to ask, right? You don't know if they're gonna deliver some of that information. A lot of times, what we do in the marketing side is we try to produce case studies ahead of time, or just have those prepared so that it's a little bit smoother of a handoff instead of bothering a client. I can just give you an example of work that we've done, that's real life, that you can see, you can engage with. So that's generally from the marketing side how we would approach that. But it never hurts to ask. It's always good to ask about references and see what's out there. Um, yeah,
Let me tell you why I'm asking the
yeah,
question that way. Here's why I'm asking the question. And actually, in your line of work, it's a little different because you can show case studies, you can show
yeah,
samples of social media and direct people to Instagram pages or whatever. It's when lead services contact us in the field, and it happens every day, multiple
Every
times
day.
oh my God,
throughout the year. I mean, they just wear us out. They give you the biggest pitch you can possibly imagine. And to date, every single one, when I ask for references, will say, well, our policy is we don't provide references. It's confidential. And
privacy.
also find the vast majority of them would not have good references. So I guess the way I'm framing it that way is, how do you find somebody good in your field? What's the best way to evaluate?
Yeah, I mean that's a loaded and a tough one. I mean, ultimately, it's the same way that you would evaluate any service, right? The best that you can is, try to speak to them, try to gauge their abilities, try to get as much information about like their historical performance as you can. You can obviously do your own research, but unfortunately, there are a lot of actors in this. And again, I'm not going to say people are out there to try to steal money from you. They're trying their best too. But, some people are just better at their job. Some offers and some products are better served for an agent. So, the best way I would say go about it is the same way that we would do it in the real estate industry, is ask for referrals. Find
Yep.
out what other people that are doing that have been successful. That's why, it helps to be in a network like IHM, where you can reach out to people who are obviously sharing the same experiences, and be like, do you have any referrals, or how have you, generate success, and to start having those conversations. And you'll find rather quickly that the people that are doing well are more willing to pass along
Sure.
information.
Absolutely.
Provide.
And we could keep this up all day. My mind is spinning, but as we reach the end of our time today, I want to thank you, Will, very much, and of course you, Jack, for sharing with us today and sharing with the audience. And I hope that all of our Institute members who are in the audience will take advantage of the webinar series that they can access through their member portals, because it is deep and rich. And that those in our audience who aren't members will look for opportunities to expand their digital presence and find ways to make their marketing truly effective rather than just expensive. And so, thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of A State of Mind, the Art of Selling Luxury Real Estate. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute, you can find more at luxuryhomemarketing.com. If you like what you just heard, please share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you've got a hot topic that you'd like us to discuss in a future podcast, feel free to let us know. Send an email to info@luxuryhomemarketing.com. Thanks for listening.